Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Matchmaker session today. My name is Juliana Weber, and I'm the project coordinator for CityLab Hamilton. Matchmaker events are where we can learn about projects that have been submitted by staff at the City of Hamilton and work with our faculty members to try and find good matches between students, faculty, and staff to tackle the projects. Today, we are joined by Juliana Petrovich, a project manager with new initiatives in transportation planning and parking at the City of Hamilton. She will be discussing the potential ways the city can use parking data and parking payment data to improve parking access in the city. So welcome, Juliana. And if you could first tell us about your role at the city and how your work impacts Hamiltonians.
Sure, I'll do my best. So again, Juliana Petrovich, project manager in the parking operations section. I'm one of 3 project managers. And our section operates and maintains the whole public parking supply. So all on and off street parking that's provided by the city. Some of our projects include replacing the parking payment infrastructure. So a recent conversion to pay-by-plate pay stations in the lots, future projects for smart meters for on-street parking, also projects for structural repairs of the parking garages and things like lot reconstructions. So basically anything that's not enforcement that would be associated with providing and operating public parking. In terms of like, what does that offer for Hamiltonians? Well, most people understand like the need for public parking in urban centers. There's generally not parking associated with all residential and commercial units. So that gap is filled by public parking. We serve residents and employees and part-time employees and customers. And it's all about making sure that that system operates well for all of those customers and is self-sustainable.
Wonderful. So you've submitted a very interesting challenge to CityLab, looking at the access to data that you're currently collecting through the city, and how to use that to make parking more accessible in the future. Could you guide us through the challenge, background information, and the objectives that you're looking for to achieve with this project?
Sure. So traditionally, like parking payment data would be something, it's more like a historical record that you can go through and be like, okay, like we had this much money made in this lot through this many transactions. Like obviously there is like details of like how much each transaction was and what time it occurred at, but it is historic data. It would be traditionally gathered through a download, and it doesn't have any information about the user. So with the conversion to things like pay-by-plate and mobile pay, we're now getting live data, which is, great. And then there's also the component of it's identifiable and that it's tied to a license plate. So you can actually see utilization by an individual, which isn't something that we ever had before. But the problem is that even though we have this new data and we have it in theory more accessible to us, we're not really using it in any way different from the historic data that we were getting before. Like all we're really looking at right now is, okay, like this is how each lot performed on a month-to-month basis. We're not doing anything special with this data, even though we have all this new technology. That's not to say that we're not using this for enforcement, because like that was the driving factor to go to these technologies, is to do like license plate enforcement. But like, it seems like there's so much more opportunity there from the type of data that we're getting that we're just not exploiting. There's a lot of technologies that are coming online that we're interested in adopting in the future. Things like occupancy sensors and stuff like that. And they're creating like, utilization data, and they have all these interfaces and stuff like that to show you like what's happening live. But we're not there yet, and we likely won't be there for a number of years. And it's not necessarily reasonable to implement that kind of technology for all of the parking that we're operating. So we're kind of looking at if there's some opportunities to be gained from this transactional data. So transactional data is not occupancy data. We know that, we acknowledge that. Some people don't pay enough for their parking session, or they overpay, they pay for the whole day and they're not there for the whole day and stuff like that. But it can still give some type of snapshot of what's happening. So like some of the things that we were thinking about was, like, can we provide very high level utilization information to a customer, like through a map interface, or information that can be fed to Google for like their kind of like occupancy information about businesses, like treating a lot like a business and saying, oh yes, like this is the typical utilization, but like today it's very busy because there might be an event or something like that, or like it's not too busy. That kind of high level data like could be very, very useful to a customer. And then there's also like other opportunities internally, potentially, like we don't know because we're not using this data, but there could be other opportunities and things like, like widgets to show us like to do our analytics for us, instead of like, we're still using that like old way of taking a month's worth of data and then just putting it into a spreadsheet and saying like this is what it is. And then like from that, it's like we're also looking at like how many people have moved to mobile pay versus like using the pay stations, and like how many people are using credit cards versus cash. But like it's not really giving us anything new that we didn't have before. So like there's that, like we could do better with analytics. Our data is coming from two sources. It is coming from the pay stations through one system, and then through the Passport app through another system. We are already like combining that data in our enforcement interface, but like it like for everybody's information, it is coming from two sources. And then like there's other possibilities, like, without breaching privacy and stuff like that, but looking at plate information and the patterns for individual plates, like potentially there is a way to see, what type of products would benefit our customers, like these people that are reoccurring, but they're not monthly permit holders. Particularly as we look to offering things like flexible permits and stuff like that. As more people go to these hybrid work models, we're solving a problem that unfortunately wasn't solved many years ago for like part-time workers. But like we have all this data. We would just like to do something with this data.
Are there any current integrations where people can see occupancy of parking lots or parking areas? Does that exist yet in Hamilton?
No, so we don't have any of that technology right now. We are looking at occupancy sensors, but like that's something that we would be like entering slowly, because there's obviously like a fairly significant capital cost with occupancy sensors. And like that is the gold standard in terms of like customer occupancy wayfinding. Like City of Burlington is using sensors in all of their lots, and for a lot of their on-street parking, so they can actually direct people to a lot and say there's 2 spaces like left, right?
Wow.
That's not what we're looking for, because that's a capital investment. So that's a whole different project. We're just kind of looking at bridging the gap between today, what we have, and the future, which would be hopefully that kind of information, but then also looking at the fact that some of our lower utilized lots, and like as we go to like smart meters on street and stuff, like our lower utilized on-street parking spaces, it may not make sense to like have that infrastructure for all of our parking. So
looking at creative ways to use that data to alleviate the current parking demands. And are you looking at doing this through the Passport app? Is that ideally what you would like to be able to use to integrate it there and people can see exactly where to go?
If we're doing something that's customer facing, Passport seems like the right opportunity. However, and like Passport is open, like they're open to like new integrations and stuff like that, which is great. But there doesn't really seem to be any that they've done in terms of like what we're asking for, using transactional data instead of actual occupancy data. But it is a customer facing platform that we already have, that it would be nice to utilize for sure. Like there is certainly the option of just doing like web-based if it's customer facing and stuff like that. Because don't necessarily expect a driver to be like actively looking at their phone to be like, oh, like this lot's empty. You would have hoped that they checked that before they started their trip, or like, you know, like they've stopped in a temporary parking area before going and finding their final parking location. But it would be nice to have it integrated into the Passport app.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Burlington has a very innovative system with the sensors. Are there other municipalities that you're aware of that are able to use the data similar to what Hamilton has to do this? Are there any other communities that you know of that are doing anything similar?
I haven't encountered any that are using transactional data. I think it's because there is better technology. Like we are asking for something that we know is not going to be accurate when we have 100% accurate technology available. And they come with their own interfaces. But like there's lots of municipalities that are using occupancy data and providing that to customers. But from what I can tell, there's no one that's using transaction data to provide that kind of information.
Okay. So let's talk about like specific student deliverables that you have in mind. Is there an idea of what you have? That I know this is kind of open-ended, and the idea is to ask, of course, to come up with an innovative solution here. But is there anything in your mind that you're hoping that student teams could take on or take a look at?
Like I said, like we're open to like a couple different things. Like we're looking for anything that's going to add value, right, to what we already have. Whether that's internal only, like that's fine. Like if it's improving our data analytics, or doing something like that. So like looking at like individual users and modeling that in terms of like, you know, identifying who our customer is and serving them better that way. But it like from our not statistician, not web developers perspective, it does seem like there is that opportunity to provide customers with either live or static information about how these lots are utilized throughout the day. To guide their parking choices so that when they're looking at like where they want to park, like we are in competition with private parking as well. Okay. So to be like, oh, well, like it looks like this lot is generally empty at this time. So that's where I'm going to park versus just showing up and driving around. But like really we are open to the ideas because we don't know what we don't know, and that's kind of why we're asking the schools to let us know like what the future of data is.
Wonderful. Well, I think that you've come to the right place at CityLab. Hopefully we can connect you with a course that can examine this in a new way. I know that this is a really relevant topic, especially as you know, our projected population is supposed to continue to increase at a rapid pace over the next 20, 30 years. So I'm looking forward to seeing what some student groups can come up with. And I just want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.